And these were probably found either in Target, Walmart, and or Home Depot. Home Depot, yeah, I wish. Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a vintage 1/6 scale accessory review video for the 21st Century Toys M134 minigun. This here was a really cool piece, and it's one that's been sitting in my collection mint in box for the longest period of time, which I am going to have to sadly open it, and there's going to be a reason for that, but needless to say, this is something that was a really cool release by 21st Century Toys, and it's one that, well, it's going to be really interesting to get on video for you all to enjoy. If you're really into vintage 1/6 scale accessory sets or just action figures in general, this video is definitely going to be something you're probably going to have some interest in. Back to the model in question, this model here was produced by the company 21st Century Toys and was sold under the brand name The Ultimate Soldier. The model was released in the early to mid 2000s, and the reason why I'm a little hazy on the actual release date is because although the model on the back of the box has a copyright of 2002, for some reason I remember these being quite prolific and more readily available and found in store shelves in the next 2 or 3 years that came afterwards. So it's in that nice little sweet spot over there. Which, if we can go back in time, in my opinion, that era was probably the golden age of 1/6 scale modeling and 1/6 scale figure collecting. Although people might look back on that and scoff today with modern eyes, but keep in mind, back then, the 1/6 scale hobby was practically mainstream. You had a ton of companies that were producing a wide range of items, from vehicles to figures to weapon sets, artillery pieces, and all these items were, one, fairly affordable, and two, were something that was a general release item. These were the things, and keep in mind back in the day, that you wanted. You walked into a store and you would always be surprised on what you would find on the shelves. You had 21st Century Toys, you had Dragon, you had Hasbro, you had Blue Box International, Hot Toys, even Soldiers of the World, all had some excellent products that were, again, just general release items. It was really fun to go toy shopping back in that era, because you never knew what you were going to find from any trip, be it to Target, to Kmart, Walmart, Toys R Us, whatever. If you walked into those stores, chances are you had an open mind, you're going to find something cool. Of all those mentioned companies, 21st Century Toys definitely stands out as one of the pack leaders, because they were really on the cutting edge, bringing out some very cool products and very ballsy products, I might add. Remember, this is the same company that gave us the 1/6 scale M5A1 Stuart, and I'd be hard-pressed to find another company that was able to do that. Yes, Dragon eventually did that with their Sherman, but that was several years down the road, and also the Stuart was a more of a general release item, while the Sherman is something that you're going to basically find online, but again, in the era when that kit came out, that was more of a trend that was happening. But 21st Century Toys produced a lot of really cool stuff, and the minigun here, of course, is definitely one of them. One thing that was cool about 21st Century Toys products was that they had a way of balancing detail fidelity and fragility. So the models would be very nicely detailed and rendered out, but not be overly frail and fragile. So you can actually play with the thing, and that was basically the goal that the engineers had in mind when they were designing this stuff back in the day. We compare that with some other sets out there, like from Dragon, for instance, just throwing that as an example, where the models are very beautifully made, like their weapon sets. They're arguably definitely more detailed compared to the 21st Century Toys counterpart. However, it definitely comes at the expense of fragility, and you'll easily break things like front sights or charging handles on the Dragon counterpart compared to the 21st Century Toys one, which was just a little bit more robust. Not as well detailed, but definitely more robust compared to the Dragon. 21st Century Toys produce a wide range of items from different eras, being from World War II to Vietnam. This one is from their modern era, and then they also did another line for villains, which was kind of cool. A little bit Hollywoody, but that's also relevant to point out because they did make another minigun under that brand name that was slightly different from the tooling on this one here, and we'll briefly go over that in this video. This particular model itself, I believe, was picked up either from a Target, a Walmart, or a Toys R Us. The model was not that expensive, and again, that was true to form to 21st Century products. This thing retailed anywhere from about $15 to about $25 US at the time, and they were a general release item. I remember seeing these on the pegboard. It was like 12 deep. So they were quite a number of these that were produced. Not really sure how many are floating around these days on eBay. I'm not really sure what the current cost of one of these are, specifically mint in box run at the moment, but I'm pretty sure if you go on eBay, you're probably going to be able to find one without too much difficulty. In fact, I think my father bought this for me. I was in school at the time, and I came home. He was like, yeah, I was out, and I picked up this for you. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, I wasn't even planning on getting, nor that I even knew this thing was even coming out. So it was a nice little surprise, and I did what I did with many of my other weapon sets. It was so beautiful, I left it in the box, and I put it tucked away in the shop's corner, squirreled away with many other sets similar to this, and it just sat and sat and sat, and it was kind of in a time capsule up until today, in the year of our Lord 2025, where I'll be able to share the unboxing with all of you. Which, by the way, I'm kind of feeling apprehensive. I really don't want to open it. I kind of like it in the mint in box, but this is something I have to get to. On the packaging itself, it's a blister pack, as you can see, and it has a cardboard backing, and this thing is quite literally dusty. I mean, this thing's been sitting on the shelf now since literally the Bush administration. So, yeah, that's pretty gnarly. Anyway, so let's go ahead and try to peek through the dust here. So we have the blister pack over here. Here you can see the model right there. We have the main receiver section of the M134 with its interesting little cage setup with the sight, as well as its two little spade grips. It's got the chute for the links and everything along those lines, along with the feeder and delinker. Here you can see the ammo trunk right here. I like that nice little weld bead that runs along. This nice sculpt that they did. And here you can see the ammo chute right here. And more than likely, this is a flexible piece. The chute itself does have the rounds painted. That's a nice little feature. They are integrally molded into the chute, so it's not like you can actually pull out the belt. The paint and weathering look pretty good on the piece as well. Some dry brushing as well as a little bit of a black wash looks like they added to it. And this was, again, something that we saw in 21st Century Toy products from the early 2000s onward. They would actually put some nice effort into properly painting things and weathering them as well. So you'd see things like dry brushing and stuff like that. We also have here a pedestal base. So we have the yoke right over here. We have the pedestal for the said pedestal base, and we have the mount with some fasteners on it and some nice little rust and other type of weathering. We also have some support legs right over here. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, these actually just plug into this. Again, I've never opened one of these, nor have I even seen one assembled, so it's going to be interesting to see how that cookie crumbles. For the remainder of the graphic design, very typical for many of the other sets during this time. They had some really cool artwork. We had like riveted panels and things like that. We have some bullet holes here. There's the name right there, M134 minigun, behind the American flag. Obviously, it's a weapon set, age 5+. I'm pretty sure I'm old enough now for that. And we also have some pretty cool little motifs like the star and some other just random numbers that are stenciled in the background. Here you can see the logo for their modern era line. And on the back, we have a bunch of other cool stuff, again, from the same era. There's the Ultimate Soldier logo, by the way. This is their second logo. The original one was a green circle, and it was just a guy with an M16A1, and they kind of changed it to add the optic over there on the carry handle. There's the second 21st Century Toys logo. The original one was slightly different typeface. And you had a bunch of jets flying to give you the American flag. Yeah, that's really dated. That's not a thing anymore, sadly. You have a nice little ribbon over there with the American flag. And here you can see some of their figures. World War II line, they had the waist gunner with the M250, which is probably a really cool set. A really, really cool set. Fortunately, it doesn't come with the ball itself. He just has a running around loose M2, which it was something that was quite popular. A lot of guys fetch for these online. Loose, the M250s with the cradle. We also have a nice little P-51 fighter pilot and a nice little airborne trooper right over there. Their figures were all right. The Dragon ones were, of course, better. The 21st Century ones were decent. That's from what I remember. But there was nothing wrong with them. You have a nice modern era guy here with a 50 cal M82 Barrett. We have a Halo jumper with the parachute, which was pretty cool. And we have a British sniper with the Accuracy International sniper rifle. Of course, they were really known for their vehicles, so we have their Special Forces Mutt, which I actually have in my collection. I have one of these. The Bradley, which was a definite cock tease because sadly this is not the one they produced. They produced the earlier M2 Bradley fighting vehicle. This is the M3. This one here appears to be actual 1/6 scale. The M2 one is just the Tamiya one, but scaled up to like 7.5 or 1/8 or so. It's kind of a letdown. Cool, but it was also kind of a letdown. We also have here a H6 Little Bird helicopter. I also have one of these in the collection too. It's pretty cool. And they also had a line of police and first responders. So you have a bomb diffuser guy with the robot, Alpine Rescue, and SWAT dude, not to mention a firefighter for good measure. And yes, there were also action accessory packs for everything involved. 2002 is the copyright, like I mentioned before on the box, but like I said before, these were more commonly seen in stores around 2005 or so, I want to say. Alright, well, enough of that stalling. It's now time for me to commit the cardinal sin and actually open up the packaging. Which, by the way, again, I've been very apprehensive about it. I really didn't want to open it. I kind of liked it in the packaging over here. But for you guys out there in YouTube land, yes, you guys, I'm doing this for you. So I'm going to commit this cardinal sin for your personal enjoyment. And also to get this documented and preserved, at least on YouTube, for future generations to appreciate. And by the way, if as a side note, if you like seeing this type of content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps me out in the algorithm and all that stuff. All right, let's go ahead and get this thing open. So it's always a Highlander situation when you're dealing with one of these sets, which means
there can be only one.
All right. I'm going to try to open up cleanly. I'm probably not going to throw away the box because I'm crazy. I'm a hoarder. So let's see. Can I get this? Okay. Oh, God. I hate doing this. I'm going to just rip the proverbial Band-Aid off. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. This hurts way more than I wanted it to. Oh, no. This is 2002 Air here. Alright, so there's the packaging with the piece removed. Just random military stenciling, which like I said before is pretty cool. And here's the unit still in the packaging. Alright, here we go. Hang on, I'm going to quickly see if it still smells like 2002. Oddly enough, it does. It smells like the old 21st Century Toys and the old Dragon action figures. If anyone has ever had the opportunity to open one of those old sets, the models had this like smell of vinyl, best way to put it, and it's just something about when you cracked one of these open, you got that aroma filled the room. Is just pure joy. Anyway, so now that this thing is exposed to the current year air, let's go ahead and start. What do you guys want me to start with? The minigun or the chest? You know, I'll save the minigun. Let's go ahead and start with the chest. Alright. So here's the ammunition chest. This would be like the type of thing you would see on a helicopter. Or any other type of vehicle. Obviously, with how hungry this thing is, you're going to eat up a lot of ammo. So these things were intended to really have quite a large box of storage for ammunition, because of, again, how thirsty this thing is. So like I stated before, the box is very nicely detailed. I like the little weld bead going on across the seam here. Is it hollow? Feels like it can open, but no, I think it's just a glued together box that is hollow on the inside. Okay, so now I'm looking at the chute itself. The chute is semi-flexible. I'm not sure if it would have been more flexible when these things first came out. Obviously, as time goes on, things dry up. But the belt itself still seems to have a lot of life left in it. As you can see from the sculpting on the piece itself, it looks really good. It has the nice little chute details right there, which are a bunch of like crimped pieces that are riveted together and are extremely flexible. It's cool how that actually works. And then you can see the 308s on the inside over here, or get a glimpse of them, and you have the links, which are painted in black, which is true to form to the real ones. On the end here, there is no exposed round or anything. It's just these two holes, more likely just plugs into the feeder delinker portion of the minigun. The under portion is, of course, very nicely detailed as well. And I also like the wash that they gave it of diluted black. This is literally how I would do this myself if I was doing one of these for a build of one flavor or another. Paint it silver, put a nice little wash on it so it gets into the nooks and crannies and exposes everything. So again, they like I said before, they were actually pretty good with their paint and weathering work. A lot of people don't really give them the due justice that they honestly deserve. I like the chest has that little molded handle right over there. It's pretty cool. And again, the olive drab on the box looks awesome. There is a seam that runs along these... Take two. There is a nice seam that runs along these portions over here. This is probably more likely something that wouldn't be there on the real one, but it's just from how these things are glued together. They just glue them together in the factory. They don't do any seam removal. They just paint and weather on top of it. So that is probably a weak point if I was to be critical about it. But other than that, this thing is more than suffice for the job at hand. All right, let's get on to the pedestal base itself. Pedestal base is rather generic. It's not based on any real pedestal base that I personally know of. It looks like they just went ahead and whipped something up. Generally, when you see these type of units, they are mounted on a helicopter or in a vehicle of one flavor or another. The pedestal base we see here is more, I guess, best way to put it, a Hollywood type thing. Let me take these little stands out. Okay, so these guys here, again, weathered to look like they're rusty and dirty. Hollow on the inside, and here goes the mounting plate itself. You can see it has these little pegs here molded onto the bottom, and obviously these guys here just plug in place. Just like so. The fit is friction fit, and it's really tight. That's, again, one thing that I liked about the 21st Century Toy stuff. They were nicely engineered in that regard. You may want to use glue, but honestly, I don't think that's really necessary. This thing is nice and stiff. It ain't going nowhere. The pedestal base itself, more likely the larger end just gets plugged into the bottom, like so. And there we have it. There's your pedestal base now fully assembled. Let's go ahead and look at the yoke. The yoke itself is actually based on the real yoke that this unit is representing. And yes, I'm going to be circling back to that as the video goes on. But it has the reinforcement rib right there on the bottom, has the correct shape, geometry, everything. And the socket over here just plugs directly into this end here. Again, a little bit stiff, but you kind of want that for something like this. You don't want it to wobble around. It can easily fall. And there we have it. I will say that the mount itself is a bit short, which is a bit interesting, but again, this is more likely the reason why I kind of needed to open this one. But again, more on that to come. So, now we got all the vegetables out of the way, let's get to the steak. The M134 minigun. Alright, this is the first time taking this thing out. Oh, this is actually pretty cool. This is actually really cool. I'm just going to be quiet so we can just soak this in. All right, now that you've had your moment of zen, it's a little, hang on, there's a little piece of cardboard here. Let me get rid of that. Come here, get out of here, you. With that little bit of crap now removed, we can see what the unit looks like unhindered. And I'm just gonna come out and say it, this thing is awesome. This is a really cool piece. And by the way, yes, I know what you're gonna be asking because it's the most logical question to ask specifically about a minigun. Oh yeah, it spins. Yes, it spins. So there you go. If you were waiting to get to that point in the video, this should make you very happy. I mean, of course, it would be kind of wacky if they did all this and didn't make it spin, but you don't know, right? But yeah, this thing does spin. Let's go ahead and start from the muzzle, work our way to the rear. Let's go ahead. The muzzle section, the barrels are all molded with the divots in place. They're not thoroughly drilled out, but this is, again, is more than suffice for a unit like this. The barrel cluster has the right geometry to it. It's not quite a parallel line thing. There is a taper to it, to the barrel, and these do have it. It has to the correct thicknesses. Even has little step downs in this section over here, which is again true to form to the real one. We have the cluster locking sections right there. There's 3 of them up front, with the major one right here. It has that securing pin right there, so that's all present. On the receiver itself, it's an M134 receiver. They did put the paint on somewhat sloppily. I will say that, like the silver over there, it's a little but for this type of the purpose for this thing, it's pretty good for what it is. I love the cam right over here. This is literally the secret sauce. This is how it works when it's cycling. The cams are, each bolt is running into these cams here, and it's grabbing the shell that gets delinked, or grabbing the round that gets delinked from the belt, and it goes ahead, brings it up, chambers it, fires it, and then it just ejects it from the other side. It's a very fascinating system, and it's one that definitely does work. On that note, here you get to see the feeder delinker. There's a lot of stuff going on over here. And by the way, this is the original feeder delinker. This isn't the one that was developed by that company. What was it, Arrow or something? So there was a company a few years later, Dillon. That's the one. Dillon Aerospace, I believe, was the one that went ahead and redesigned the feeder delinker, because the original one that was designed by GE back in the day had some shortcomings with it, and it did induce a jam or two. So, but this one here is proper for this variant of the M134. The one with the Dillon is the M134D, if I'm not mistaken. On this side here, we have the electric motor right over here, has the power socket and everything. Has the fastener details where it would be bolted to the receiver, and this is where the gear is. Kind of works like a starter gear almost on a car in a way. I think it has a solenoid. I believe it does, if I'm not mistaken. And we have the mounts right there that hooks it up to this apparatus. And we have the rear spindle also. It's all here. Again, it's very nicely rendered out with nice little fastener details right over there. Hopefully it comes out in this light. I'm not really sure you guys can see it, but rest assured there are 1, 2, 3 fasteners in these areas here, and they look like Allen fasteners, which again would be true to form to the real one. Alright, and this now brings us to the apparatus here. And this is again what separates this from many of the other miniguns that were on the market in 1/6 scale at the time. Even today for that matter. So starting with the frame itself, it looks true to form. This is what the frame would look like with the correct geometry to it. And it has the correct sight. It has the spider sight on the back and the front post right there where it needs to be in the front. The unit is spade grip fired. And we have these plastic grips over here. It does have a little like safety thing like you would find on, say, like a jet fighter plane, where you depress that in order to pull the trigger. And the trigger itself is painted in red. Very nice touch. It gives a nice little color pop to it. Alright, let's go ahead and get this assembled. So I'm just going to go ahead and pop this guy into here, into the yoke. And that's how it goes, by the way. There's no instructions on how to assemble it, but it's pretty straightforward. The yoke plugs into these 2 little holes here found on the mounting frame. And the thing just basically just hangs off of it. The frame, by the way, and the receiver are 2 separate parts. You can pop them off if need be, like say, which is actually good if you find one of these and you want to repaint it. You don't have to worry about working around this frame over here. You could literally just pop it off and repaint to your heart's content if desired. All right, so that's the unit right here. Before I go ahead and put the chute on, I just want to say that the free range of the pivoting is pretty good. Unlike some units like Brownings, for instance, where we have a long barrel and the heavy receiver section, it becomes a little awkward when you have it on a pedestal base sometimes, depending on the pedestal base itself with the way the weight is. But for the minigun here, that's just not the case. It balances quite well. The unit can pivot, but what's pivoting is actually the whole stem here. It's not really the yoke. Yes, you can break it in. Well, as it turns out, I broke it. The yoke, and this is actually important to get on camera, the yoke stem right here is quite thin. And when it's plugged into the pedestal base over here, it's really in there nice and tight, like I mentioned before. And when I was trying to turn it, I actually accidentally snapped it. So bear this in mind. If you have one of these, this can easily happen to you. So we're just going to build it as we fly it. Fortunately, I can fix that in about 2 minutes. So that's not a problem. But for the rest of the video, I'm just going to have to hold it like, well, like Schwarzenegger did in Terminator. But anyway, so let's go ahead and see if I could go ahead and fit the chute in, just so I can point out where that goes. Ah, here it is. So on the feeder delinker, we have these 2 pegs here that emerge from the unit. They were actually nice and long, which is great because the unit can just plug right in, just like so. And there you go. It actually does a pretty good job holding it in place. The only problem, though, is that the stiffness of the chute kind of inhibits it a little bit, but I guess that comes with the territory with this type of unit over here. I guess if you want to mold it, you can hit it with a hairdryer very carefully and briefly. That will soften it up so you can go ahead and position in a way that you like, so it makes it easier to display. So, all right, so I'm going to go ahead and repair this thing off camera. When we get back to it, I can go ahead and give my final thoughts on this unit over here. Well, this video took an interesting turn. It went from a review video to a tutorial repair video, and for good reason. The reason why I'm including this information in this video is because of how easy this piece broke. I have a feeling that this is something that's quite common for this set here. So if you encounter this and this happens to you, you can fix it. And fortunately, it's really easy to do, and I have the necessary tools here on the table. One thing I do want to say is that if you think you're just going to roll with super glue to glue the piece back together and it's going to hold, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. It's not going to bond, and it's just going to break off at the earliest convenience. The best way to do is with the pin technique, and I'll show you how to do that momentarily. To do this, I have my pin vise over here. I have a thin little sewing pin, which came in this little pack here. This can be found in basically any craft store. I have a number 72 or a .0250 Dremel bit. These can be found, by the way, from the vendor listed in the video description. Wire cutter, and of course, a bottle of super glue. If you're watching this and you're thinking to yourself, well, John, can I use a Dremel? The answer is no. I don't recommend the Dremel because even at its slowest setting, the material that the bit will remove will be greater compared to the pin vise. For more precision, you want to use the pin vise, and for something like this, precision is going to be paramount because this all hinges on how tight that hole is for this metal rod to stick inside. The tighter the hole, the better the grip, the more stronger the repair will be. And with a Dremel, you're not really helping yourself with that regard. So I'm just going to go ahead and put the pin vise, or the bit in the pin vise. Now I'm just going to carefully just drill out this piece over here. By the way, in order to remove the peg from the stem, it was on so tight, I actually just used a metal rod and I just plunked it out. And that's something that, again, you want to be aware of. So here's the piece here. You can see the broken middle section. It kind of has a divot already naturally in the middle, which is great for me. I'm going to carefully line this up, which, by the way, I will say it's easier to do off camera than on, but since we're all here together, I might as well show you. Fortunately, this piece is pretty thick with the amount of plastic, so drilling in here is going to be pretty strong. You don't have to worry about it having not enough material. Oh, there we go. Drilled all the way through. Fantastic. Alright, so there goes the hole drilled in there. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to temporarily remove the yoke, and I'm going to drill, again, right there at dead center. Now you don't want to drill too deep. Remember, we do have this little reinforcement plate here, and you want to drill square. So if the bit's too big, it's going to rip out, and if you're drilling in an angle, it's going to rip out too, neither of which are beneficial. The reason why I'm going with this bit over here is because, as you can see, it's thinner than the material found on the strip, which means you get to drill into this piece and you'll get some sufficient material holding the thing in place. Okay, that's done. Alright, from this point here, I'm just going to go ahead and take the pin. I will drop a glue. nice and tight, which is exactly what you want. Then I'm going to just use the wire snipper to snip off the extra that's not needed. Like that. I have about a 1/4 of an inch or so of metal rod, which is again more than suffice for the job at hand. We'll drop the super glue. Now I'm going to go ahead and remount it in place. One thing I want to make mention of, notice where the glue marks are on the original piece. You just want to go ahead and basically Cinderella it so that it lines up exactly where you want it, like that. And once the piece is squeezed in place, as you can see, it is a perfect repair. Nice and strong, and it won't break again like it did originally. Alright, so let me go ahead and snap this guy back in place. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and go back to the photo booth. With the unit fully repaired and back into the photo studio, you get an idea on what the unit looks like fully assembled. And it does have some pros and cons. So the first thing I'm going to mention is a con, and that is with the ammo chute. The biggest hurdle that I'm having is this thing is just way too stiff, and it has a mind of its own. It's not really pliable, and because of that, you really can't adjust it or contort it to a certain way that fits the unit. No matter what I do, it's going to want to pop off before it actually is something that is a bit more manageable. Something like this would be more appropriate, but it just springs into this position over here. I presume you can hit it with a hair dryer to soften up, to go ahead and loosen up so you can resculpt it, because the thing does have some memory to it. But this is a very risky procedure and could potentially cause some serious damage. So is that something you want to try? It's really up to the user's discretion. Another idea could be the warm water trick, where you do the same thing in some pretty warm water, and that may be able to soften up so you can sculpt it at that point there. However, again, I don't know if it's going to have any detrimental effects on the material itself or even on the paint, because then the paint will start to flake potentially. So again, there's some hazards out there. But the way we have it right here, this is definitely less than ideal in my opinion. The other thing that is also a ding on the set, in my opinion, is the overall height of the pedestal base, or lack thereof. This thing is ridiculously short. How short exactly? Well, let me go ahead and grab one of my 1/6 scale figures, and you'll see what I'm talking about. And this should give you a good idea of what I'm referring to. Obviously, this thing is meant for a manlet to use, so unless your action figure is Danny DeVito or Mini-Me from Austin Powers 2, it's going to be a bit awkward trying to have a display where the guy's actually using it. You probably have to prop this thing up on some phone books or something. Which actually prompts me to why I went ahead and busted this thing out of the packaging. You see, shortly before the events that happened in this video, I was actually reached out and contacted via Facebook by one of you viewers out there who saw several of the other MG sets and cradles that I offer on the East Coast Armory catalog, and he hit me up wanting to go ahead and wonder if I can adapt the 21st century M134 for a ECA pedestal base. The ECA pedestal bases are much taller than this mantlet edition over here and are much more to scale, which means if you're hooking it up in a figure display, the figure is much more easily posed with said unit compared to this one over here. To which I said, sure, that's definitely something that's interesting and I could definitely tackle. And with the unit removed off of the pedestal base, you get an idea of the stem here found on the bottom. As I mentioned before, the stem is great for mounting onto the kit supplied pedestal base. However, if you're going to mount it on any other pedestal base, obviously the ECA ones included, you are going to have to make a modification to the setup over here because this socket, or which would be a socket on the real one, is too tiny. On the real unit, this yoke here was able to be fitted to any of the US military pattern of pedestal bases that were on inventory. This includes the versions found on the Jeep to the ones even mounted on tanks. Remember, this thing here was mounted on just about anything. And if it can mount on a Browning type cradle, it could also mount on an M134 minigun. Also, as a quick little side note that I just realized, I actually had the yoke mounted on in reverse. The thing is not symmetrical. If you look up close at the profile, one side is flat while the other side has an angle to it, and generally the angle side would be the front portion of these yokes. Or at least that's how it is on the Browning mounts. Pretty sure this one's the same way. Back to what I was mentioning before with the yoke itself. In order for this yoke to be mounted to any of those pedestal bases, it would have the standard type socket mount that's found on the bottom, which this thing does not have. So one of the stipulations that the customer requested was a way to adapt this to fit onto the ECA pedestal base. Well, to do that, I simply just designed an adapter. The adapter was hand turned out of resin on my lathe to the dimensions that were necessary in order to plug into this section here and for it to plug into the ECA pedestal base. This, by the way, is going to be discussed in far more depth in the upcoming video that I have for that, which should be dropping shortly after this video here makes its debut. However, after tooling that component up by hand, I was looking at it and I'm like, you know, this would probably be a really great idea if I go ahead and release this as a 3D printed part, because there are quite a few of these things floating around, and I'm pretty sure you would want to have a better mounting compared to this unit over here. Plus, it also allows you to mount this to an actual vehicle, which would be kind of cool. So I went ahead and took the dimensions from the hand turn unit, and I went ahead, popped open CAD, and I designed a proper adapter piece that is listed on the ECA Heavy Weapons catalog. Unfortunately, the hand turned one is not available in the photo area at this time, but on the screen right now, right in this corner, you should see the sample sections of the adapter on screen. And again, these are the ones that are going to be 3D printed and listed on the ECA catalog. The link, by the way, is listed in the bottom portion here below, and also going to be also found in the video description. The piece, of course, comes unpainted, so this is something that you are going to have to do if you purchase one of those parts, but a simple shot of flat black spray paint, and you should be able to carry on from there. And then your figure is going to have to break his back trying to operate this thing, because trying to shoot one of these squatting over like that doesn't look very comfortable. For the time being, though, I could go ahead and pop this thing back onto the stock pedestal base so I can continue with the remainder of this review. So, obviously, this set does have several drawbacks, as I mentioned before. However, one of the positive attributes that this model does have is this subject matter. This is a very interesting piece because, again, of what it is. And although the topic of the minigun is one that's actually quite popular in 1/6 scale, this is by far the first minigun, nor was it the last that was produced in 1/6. However, this, as far as I know, is the only rendition of this particular unit that has ever been produced. And what I mean by that is not necessarily with the M134 itself. There have been plenty of M134s on the market, from Hot Toys back in the early 2000s to, I'm pretty sure there have been several other versions that have been released over the years. But those other variants of the M134 are not the correct one. And what I mean by that is that those ones generally emulate the Hollywood version of the M134. So if you ever seen one, it's more or less mimicking the ones we saw in, say, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, where it has one single spade grip and it has a chainsaw type handle on top, and that's how the figure is supposed to hold the piece. However, that was purely a Hollywood thing. The real M134s that were used by the military were in this type of format over here, where it had this box type frame, the sights, and the two plastic spade grips. This was the standard M134, and this was the one that we saw mounted on helicopters, M113s, the gun trucks. All those really infamous photographs of these things being used in action were always in this configuration over here. For the longest period of time, in fact, I think it's even still true today, that this is the only option of a US military pattern of M134 in 1/6 scale. One other thing I want to mention is that towards the end of the 1990s and of course into the global war on terror period, the M134 received an upgrade, and this was done again by the company Dillon Aero, where not only did they revise and improve the feeder delinker system, but they also went ahead and redesigned the mounting system that the unit has. No longer did it have this cage type setup with the dual grips in this type of format. Instead, it's now a yoke system where it's mounted on the side of the weapon, and it has more of a smaller type pistol grip layout with the buttons that are in a different format. Those units are known as the M134D, and those are the units that we've seen all throughout the 2000s period and into today. So if you're rendering something for the Iraq War or the Afghanistan War, then that would be the version that you want, not this one over here. Is it possible to convert one of these into the D variant? The answer is actually yes. With the way the unit is mounted to this system here, it actually pops off. It's not glued on. So once the unit is removed, Aesthetically speaking, it looks very similar to the M134D, with just some minor tweaks here or there, but you can easily then fabricate the remainder of the system in order to complete the remainder of the conversion. Is it doable? Yes, but it's going to be a project, and it's something you are going to have to do quite a bit of scratch building on, or CAD work and 3D printing if you have the chops to do so. But again, it's still an option, specifically if you're looking for something like that. Well, with the magic of editing, after I was done filming the video, I decided to go ahead and give the hot water trick a go. And what you see here is actually quite a bit of an improvement. I'm pretty sure if I use slightly hotter water, I could probably go ahead and conform it even more, but the piece was actually somewhat of a success. I just threw in my hot water heater, just some water, filled it up, and I think I went with 175 degrees. It's the lowest setting that the hot water heater has, and after a minute or so of just soaking into the warm water and then contorting it a bit and then freezing it in its bent state under some cold water, this here is the end result, and it does look a bit better now in this regard. Pretty sure if I use slightly hotter water and maybe kept it in longer, perhaps I could go ahead and get it to be a little bit more flexible, but for the time being, I think this one works okay for this setup. The piece did become quite flexible, and the paint, most importantly, didn't have any detrimental effects. No chipping or anything along those lines, so I was actually quite lucky in that regard. Just one thing you do want to watch out for is that if you do this procedure, make sure that the ammo can is empty, because it is hollow and it does fill up with water. As you can see, it leaked out and it's all over my table, but it's just water. It'll dry up nice and harmlessly. However, again, I did want to go ahead and try the technique, because I'm pretty sure I was going to be getting people typing in the comment section, "Oh, no, do the water trick. It's a great way to get it to contort." And I could definitely confirm that is most certainly the case. I'm pretty sure if I would use slightly hotter water and potentially left the thing in for a longer period of time, I maybe even be able to get the thing to model and mold a bit better compared to the way I have it here. Either way, it's a huge improvement compared to the way it was originally. As for this unit over here, am I going to go ahead and swap out the pedestal base? Honestly, I'm on the fence for it. I kind of like it in the original condition over here, just to keep in my reference collection. Maybe I'll pick up another one. If not, maybe I think I might have another one squirreled away in my stash. If I do, I may leave that one boxed, to be honest. But perhaps I might look on eBay, see if I could track one of these down, and perhaps I can make one on a proper pedestal base. Oh, something else that came to mind that I just realized, and it's also missing on this, is the power system. Yes, obviously this is an electrically fired weapon, so because of that, you will have an external power source, which includes a plug as well as some kind of a power source, be it a battery, if it's in this type of a format here, or obviously on a vehicle. But that's one thing that is also missing on this. So if you're working on one of these and you have it mounted on a gun truck or whatever, you are going to need to go ahead and fabricate the power cord system. Here you can see where the outlet is for the cord itself. And so something like that is going to have to be fabricated. Fortunately, finding reference photographs of those are not very hard to do online, and if you have the chops, you could probably just scratch build one of those to complete the look. But back to what I was saying before, yeah, maybe I could potentially track down another one of these units and model it on one of my ECA mounts, just to get a good idea on what that looks like. But I'll leave that information for another video. And with that, that wraps up this vintage 1/6 scale model review for the 1/6 scale 21st Century Toys M134 minigun. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel, where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being 1/6 scale model review videos like this one over here, or my usual type of content being 1/6 scale project update videos and smaller scale model showcase videos when they get posted. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook, where I have more photographs of both the smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. And of course, don't forget to swing by eastcoastarmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again, and I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Till then.